You were probably taught that atomic energy is something hidden inside atoms, a powerful substance locked away in tiny cores, waiting to be released. Crack the atom, and out pours an enormous amount of energy, like breaking open a vault. That picture is neat. It is also wrong, in almost every way that matters. The first mistake is thinking atomic energy is stored somewhere, as if atoms are little batteries packed with fuel. They aren't. There is no glowing reservoir inside an atom, no compressed substance waiting to explode. Nothing is hiding in there. The second mistake is thinking atoms are special because they are small, as if smallness itself is what gives atomic energy its power. It doesn't. The power of atomic energy has nothing to do with size. It has to do with rules. Feynman was very clear about this, even if people often missed the point. Atomic energy is not a discovery of something new inside matter. It is a consequence of how matter is allowed to rearrange itself. That distinction matters. When you hear energy from atoms, your intuition immediately imagines extraction, taking something out, pulling energy loose from where it was trapped. Physics does not describe it that way. Nothing is taken out of the atom. What happens instead is this: the configuration changes. That's it. Atoms do not contain energy the way a tank contains gasoline. They participate in arrangements that have different energies associated with them. Change the arrangement, and the energy accounting changes with it. The universe keeps score. You change the score by changing the pattern. Now look at nuclear reactions, because this is where the myth gets loudest. In nuclear fission, you split a heavy nucleus into lighter ones. People say energy is released. What they really mean is that the total energy of the final configuration is lower than the initial one. The difference appears as motion, heat, and radiation. Nothing escaped, nothing was freed, nothing was stored and then unleashed. The numbers changed because the pattern changed. This is where mass comes in and confuses everything. You were told that mass turns into energy, that a tiny amount of mass becomes a huge amount of energy, thanks to that famous equation. This is usually presented as if mass were a substance that can be converted into a different substance called energy. That interpretation is wrong. Mass is not stuff. Energy is not stuff. They are two ways of describing the same accounting system, under different conditions. When a nuclear reaction occurs, the mass of the final products is different from the mass of the initial ones. That difference corresponds exactly to the change in the energy bookkeeping. No material essence vanished. No glowing fluid appeared. The relationship between mass, motion, and binding changed. This is why atomic energy feels so dramatic. The energy differences associated with nuclear configurations are enormous compared to chemical ones. Not because atoms hide more energy, but because the forces involved are different. Chemical reactions rearrange electrons. Nuclear reactions rearrange nuclei. The rules governing those rearrangements operate on very different scales. That's the secret. Not energy hidden inside atoms. Different rules. Electrons are bound by electromagnetic forces. Nuclei are bound by the strong nuclear force. The strength, range, and structure of those forces determine how much the energy accounting changes when you rearrange things. Atomic energy is powerful because nuclear binding is powerful, not because atoms are special containers. This is where most explanations quietly fail. They treat the atom like a box with something inside. Physics treats the atom like a configuration in a field. There is no inside in the way you imagine. There is no boundary where energy sits. There is only a system obeying rules that assign different energy values to different arrangements. Change the arrangement, and the universe updates the numbers. That's all that happens. Now think about how unsettling that actually is. It means atomic energy is not a resource in the way oil or coal is a resource. You are not mining energy from atoms. You are forcing matter into configurations it would not otherwise choose, and letting the accounting difference show up as radiation and heat. You are exploiting stability. Heavy nuclei are less stable than certain lighter ones. The universe prefers lower energy configurations, not because it has preferences, but because those configurations are allowed to persist more easily. When you split or fuse nuclei, you are not extracting power. You are letting the system move toward a configuration that fits the rules better. The power comes from the rules, not the atoms. This is why atomic energy feels so fundamental. It is not about chemistry or material properties. It is about the deepest interactions that allow matter to exist at all. And here is the part people almost never hear. The energy released in nuclear reactions was never inside the atom in the first place. It only becomes meaningful when the reaction happens. Before the reaction, the energy difference is not sitting somewhere waiting. It is a property of a comparison that has not yet occurred. Energy is relational. This is why you cannot talk about the energy of an atom in isolation in any absolute sense. You can only talk about the energy of a system relative to another configuration. Atomic energy is not a substance. It is a difference, and differences only exist when something changes. Once you really accept that, the phrase power of atoms starts to sound misleading. Atoms do not have power. The laws governing them do. Atomic energy is not a secret locked inside matter. It is what happens when you force matter to obey different rules. If atomic energy isn't stored like fuel, then the obvious question follows. Why is it so much larger than chemical energy? Why does rearranging nuclei release millions of times more energy than rearranging electrons? The answer has nothing to do with atoms being special containers. It has everything to do with how tightly different parts of the universe are constrained. Chemical reactions barely disturb the structure of matter. They shuffle electrons around nuclei that remain intact. The electromagnetic force involved is strong enough to form molecules, but weak enough that those rearrangements only change the energy accounting a little. Nuclear reactions are different. They tamper with the most tightly bound structures matter can form without collapsing into something else entirely. The nucleus is held together by the strong nuclear force, a force so intense that it overcomes the electrical repulsion between positively charged protons. That balance is delicate. Change it even slightly, and the energy bookkeeping shifts dramatically. This is why nuclear energy feels explosive, not because energy was waiting to escape, but because you are disturbing one of the deepest compromises the universe allows. The nucleus is not a box. It is a truce between forces that would otherwise tear matter apart. When that truce is altered, the difference appears as radiation, heat, and motion. The universe is not releasing something. It is correcting an imbalance. This is why the phrase unlocking atomic energy is misleading. Nothing was locked. The system was stable. You made it unstable. And stability in physics is everything. Stable configurations persist. Unstable ones decay. The difference between them is not stored power. It is allowed behavior. Now consider fusion, because fusion exposes this idea even more clearly. In fusion, light nuclei combine to form heavier ones. Again, people say energy is released. Again, Nothing is released. The final configuration simply has a lower energy than the initial one. Hydrogen nuclei fuse into helium because helium is more stable under the rules of the strong force. The difference in energy accounting emerges as radiation. Stars are not burning fuel. They are rearranging stability. This is why stars shine for billions of years without running out of energy in the way engines do. They are not consuming a substance. They are following a gradient of allowed configurations. Once that gradient flattens, the star changes form. This is the real power behind atomic energy. It is not about extraction. It is about permission. The universe allows certain configurations to exist more easily than others. When you force a system from a less stable configuration to a more stable one, the difference appears as usable energy. Atomic energy is large because the stability differences at the nuclear level are large. That's it. No secret reservoir. No hidden fire. No mystical force. Just rules that assign different energy values to different arrangements. This also explains why atomic energy is dangerous in a way chemical energy isn't. You are interfering with the structures that normally change only under extreme conditions. When you disturb them artificially, the correction is violent. Not because the atom is angry, because the rules are unforgiving. The universe does not ease into lower energy states when you shove it hard enough. It snaps. Now here is the part that usually gets missed. Atomic energy is not special because it is atomic. It is special because it involves the strongest force that still allows complex matter to exist. Any deeper, and matter collapses into something unrecognizable. This is why there is no everyday energy source beyond the nuclear scale. You are already near the bottom of what the universe permits without destroying structure entirely. This is also why atomic energy feels like a glimpse into something fundamental. It is, but not because atoms hide secrets, because the forces that bind them sit near the edge of what reality allows. And now comes the final inversion. The secret of atomic energy is not that atoms are powerful. It is that stability is rare. Most arrangements of matter do not last. They fall apart quickly. The ones that do persist are special, not because they contain something, but because the rules protect them. When you alter those protections, the universe responds immediately. Atomic energy is the cost of violating stability. Once you see it this way, the entire mythology collapses. There is no energy locked inside atoms any more than there is energy locked inside a stretched spring. There is only a difference between what is and what could be. Energy is the number that measures that difference. Atomic energy is not hidden. It is calculated. And that is why it is both so powerful and so predictable. You can calculate exactly how much energy will appear before anything happens, because nothing is being discovered. You are just changing a configuration and letting the bookkeeping update. This is what Feynman meant when he pushed back against mystical explanations. He knew that the atom did not contain a secret substance. It contained a lesson. The universe does not reward curiosity with hidden treasures. It rewards it with understanding of constraints. Once you understand the constraints, the power of atoms stops being mysterious. It becomes inevitable. Atomic energy feels powerful because the changes it produces are dramatic. Heat, a light, radiation, shock. But none of that tells you what the power actually is. It only tells you how violently the universe responds when you force it into a different configuration. Power is not something atoms possess. Power is how quickly constraints are reasserted when you break a balance. When you split a nucleus, you are not unleashing a force. You are removing a carefully maintained compromise between competing interactions. The universe corrects that imbalance immediately because it has no reason not to. This is why nuclear reactions don't behave gently. They are not engines that can idle. They are corrections. Compare this to chemical reactions. They happen all the time, slowly, controllably, because the stability differences involved are small. The universe has plenty of room to adjust. At the nuclear level, the room is gone. This is why atomic energy seems to jump straight from nothing to catastrophe. It is not gradually releasing stored power. It is snapping from one allowed configuration to another, with no intermediate states that last. That snapping is what you experience as enormous energy. Now think about how this reframes the idea of control. You do not control atomic energy by handling a substance. You control it by managing configurations, neutron absorption, reaction rates, geometry, timing, moderation. Everything is about arrangement. If atomic energy were a thing inside atoms, control would mean containment. In reality, control means preventing certain arrangements from occurring too quickly. That alone should tell you the secret was never inside the atom. It was always in the rules. This also explains something that feels paradoxical to many people. The same atomic processes that can destroy cities also power stars gently for billions of years. The difference is not the atom, it is the conditions. The sun is not a bomb because the reactions occur in a configuration that limits how fast stability is restored. Pressure, temperature, and gravity enforce balance. The universe is allowed to correct itself slowly, change the configuration, and the correction accelerates. Atomic energy is not inherently explosive. It is indifferent. It does exactly what the rules permit and nothing else. Now, here is the deeper layer most explanations never reach. The energy released in nuclear reactions was never waiting inside the atom, but it was never created either. It exists only as a comparison. Before the reaction, the universe assigns one energy value to the configuration. After the reaction, it assigns another. The difference is what you observe. That difference did not exist as a thing before the change. It existed only as a potential comparison. This is why atomic energy cannot be meaningfully discussed without talking about processes. There is no atomic energy in isolation. There is only atomic energy relative to another possible arrangement. Energy does not live in atoms. It lives in differences between states. This is why you cannot measure atomic energy without doing something. You have to cause a reaction. Energy does not reveal itself by sitting still. This also explains why atomic energy does not violate conservation. Nothing appears from nowhere. The accounting was always consistent. You simply force the universe to update which numbers apply. The power comes from the steepness of the change, not from a hidden source. And now we arrive at the quiet conclusion that usually gets lost behind fear and spectacle. Atomic energy is not mysterious because atoms are strange. It is mysterious because humans are attached to the idea of substances. Once you remove that attachment, atomic energy becomes almost disappointingly logical. Strong forces bind nuclei tightly. Some bindings are more stable than others. Forcing a system toward greater stability changes the energy accounting. That's it. No secret fire. No trapped essence. No forbidden substance. Just rules that do not negotiate. Feynman understood this instinctively. That's why he resisted grand language. He knew atomic energy was not a revelation about matter. It was a revelation about how badly human intuition handles constraint-based systems. The atom did not teach us that there is immense power hidden in small things. It taught us that rearranging stability at the deepest level produces consequences that intuition cannot scale. That lesson is far more important than the energy itself, because once you understand it, you stop looking for hidden sources of power and start paying attention to structure, to arrangement, to rules. Atomic energy is not the power of atoms. It is the power of changing the rules that atoms are obeying. At the end of this trail, the phrase "secret behind atomic energy" should start to feel misleading. Not because there is no explanation, but because there was never anything hidden to begin with. Atomic energy was never concealed inside atoms like a treasure. It was always visible in the equations, waiting for someone to stop asking the wrong kind of question. The wrong question was always, what is inside the atom? The right question was, what arrangements does the universe allow and how strongly does it enforce them? Once you ask that, everything falls into place. The atom is not a container. The nucleus is not a vault. Energy is not a substance waiting to escape. There is only a system sitting in a particular configuration because the rules permit it to sit there. When you change that configuration, the rules do not hesitate. They do not soften their response. They do not negotiate with your expectations. They apply. That application is what you experience as power. This is why atomic energy feels so final, so absolute. There is no gradual easing into the result. The universe does not gently warn you when you push against its deepest constraints. It responds exactly as the structure demands. That response is not moral. It is not political. It is not emotional. It is mechanical, in the purest sense of the word. Once you see this, atomic energy stops being mysterious and starts being almost frighteningly ordinary. Not ordinary in scale, but ordinary in logic. It is the same logic that governs everything else. A stretched spring releases energy when you let it go. Not because energy was hiding in the spring, but because the relaxed configuration is more stable. Atomic energy works the same way, just at a level where the stability differences are enormous. A chemical bond breaks because another arrangement is favored. A nucleus splits because another arrangement is favored. The universe does not care which scale you operate on. It applies the same principle everywhere. This is why there is no special atomic explanation of energy. There is only one explanation, applied in a regime where the numbers are extreme. The power of atoms is not a separate phenomenon. It is the same phenomenon you see everywhere else, amplified by deeper constraints. And here is the final truth that usually gets buried under awe and fear. Atomic energy did not reveal a new kind of power. It revealed how little margin there is between stability and collapse at the deepest level of matter. The nucleus sits on a knife edge, bound tightly enough to exist, loose enough that rearrangement is possible. That balance is not guaranteed, it is permitted. And when you push it, the universe responds instantly. That is the secret. Not that atoms are special, not that energy is hidden, not that matter contains unimaginable power, but that stability itself is rare, fragile, and enforced without mercy. Once you understand that, atomic energy stops feeling like a mystery solved by clever engineering and starts feeling like a warning written into the structure of reality. You are not extracting power. You are overriding stability. And stability is the only thing standing between structure and chaos. Feynman understood this when he insisted on stripping away the language of storage and release. He knew that atomic energy was not a story about what matter contains. It was a story about what matter is allowed to be. That shift matters because it changes how you think about technology, progress, and limits. It reminds you that power does not come from hidden sources. It comes from how close you are to the boundaries the universe enforces. The closer you operate to those boundaries, the less room there is for error. Atomic energy lives right at that edge. And now, finally, the phrase makes sense. The secret behind atomic energy is not inside the atom. It is in the rules that decide which arrangements can exist and which cannot. Once you see that, the mystery dissolves. Not into comfort, but into clarity. There was never a hidden fire. There was only a balance. And the moment you disturb it, the universe answers exactly the way it always does, without hesitation,